Hello and welcome to the Savage Movie Night podcast. Today we are talking all about the 2003 classic Freaky Friday. I'm your loved his life with Mikey, but now thanks to Kane can see no evil host, Adam. Joining me, as always, is my still torturing their younger brother by sticking underwear on his head co-host, Kristen. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Adam.
And of course, it's just so difficult to get off. I mean, it's not like you could just like cut the, elastic waistband or something.
That would make less drama, and the point of it is the drama of it. Honestly, to even think of that in the first place, impressive. Like, I was never that mean to my brothers, never.
And of course, the show wouldn't be complete without our enjoying watching actors old enough to have mortgages and families desperately try and pass as teens co-host Rob. Hi, Rob.
Adam, Kristen, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Always glad to be doing another episode with you guys. So, like we said at the top, we were talking all about Freaky Friday. What is your guys' familiarity with Freaky Friday, especially as we were talking specifically about the 2003 version?
So my mom's told me for years to watch the original Freaky Friday, but I haven't. I've only seen this 2001, 2003 one, but I've always loved it because like how you guys talk about the 80s is your guys' era, the 2000s was my era. A lot of the movies that came out from there have a very nostalgic bit to them for me, and this one is just one that was played all the time in my household as a kid. Also, one of my brothers kind of had he would get really into one movie, and I feel like Freaky Friday was one of them that I definitely had on all the time because he would just want to pick that one over and over and over again. And when it comes to body swapping, I've seen some films with it, and I feel like I'm pretty familiar with it. It's in a ton of cartoons. That happens a lot too. I'm very familiar with the concept, and I think it can be done well. It just has to, I think because it's been done so much, to do it in a modern lens, you kind of have to try to do something a little different with it, I feel like. Or I don't know, because they're coming out with another movie, a sequel to Freaky Friday, so perhaps they can do the same thing over and over again, and it'll work.
Well, we'll see just how long this concept of basically doing the same thing over and over again has been working. Seems like it's been going pretty well for a while. But
right,
Rob, how about you? Did you watch?
I had heard of it. I had heard of it, but I was not familiar with it. No.
Did you see any other movies where it used the same basic concept, or see TV shows or anything where oh no, now I'm in your body, kind of thing?
I'm sure I have. It's so absurd to me. I don't remember it.
Well, I mean, at this point, as Kristen kind of pointed out, it's become a trope, and we'll kind of talk about the origins of, where it came about. But, I had, weirdly enough, I think my mom had wanted to see it. And she didn't like going to theaters much. So it was rare, she would say, hey, there's this movie I want to see, and it's in theaters. And I'm pretty sure Freaky Friday was one of them, this remake in 2003. Because I remember seeing it in theaters with her. And it's not something I would have, I was 20 years old. And I would not have gone out of my way to see this otherwise. And I remember at the time, at least, being pleasantly surprised by how much I enjoyed it. In terms of body swapping, there were a couple body swapping movies that came out in the 80s. There was Vice Versa with Judge Reinhold and Fred Savage. That one I watched a lot as a kid. And then there was another one called Father Like Son with Dudley Moore and Kirk Cameron that I didn't watch quite as much. But I do remember, I do have vague memories of watching that one. And who knows, maybe we'll do something else where we kind of talk about those in more detail, maybe some supplemental material or something. But and then, like we said, it's in a bunch of fiction. Futurama did a whole episode where it wasn't just two people swapping; it was a whole bunch of people, and like the mechanism for it like led to, because like Futurama, the writers were not just like comedy nerds, but like math nerds, and like and I'm using nerd like in the best way, because like guys from like Harvard and Yale and like Ivy Leagues, to the point like they actually, because like the mechanism was like you couldn't just like go in and like easily swap things, so like they ended up having to write a whole new mathematical equation, uh, like that got put into like a paper in order to solve the problem they created in the script, which was kind of cool. Excited to explore the rest of the history with you guys.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see what Rob thinks, because prior to this episode, he mentioned that he wanted his money back, which is very intriguing to me. So very excited to get into it.
Yeah. Well, we're not only going to learn what Rob thinks and why, but in today's episode, we are going to learn what you write before you create the model of a very modern Major General who has information, vegetable, animal, and mineral, what happened in 2001 that changed everything, and most importantly, why is Gomez Adams in charge of a submarine? Because today we are talking all about the 2003 classic Freaky Friday. But first, a word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Jazzology with Willard Jenkins. Jazzology is a fun and challenging jazz trivia show where two contestants go head to head for a chance to win $100 and prove their jazz knowledge. Watch along and see if you know the answers. Want to prove you are a true jazzologist by appearing as a contestant on the show? Use the link in the description of any episode to sign up. New episodes air every other Saturday on the Savage Content YouTube channel, youtube.com/savagecontent. And all past episodes are available under the Live tab. Thanks to Jazzology for sponsoring today's episode. And now, back to the show. So, this section was originally going to be different, with a much deeper dive into the history of body swapping fiction. Instead, I actually restrained myself and cut things. We are going to speed run the early history of body swapping. It started with a thought experiment in 17th century English philosopher John Locke's 1690 essay, creatively titled An Essay Concerning Human Understanding. It first appeared in fiction in an 1831 short story called Transformation by Mary Shelley. This early use was more of an explanation of the inner self, akin to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, than later body swapping fiction. Another short story and some comedic operas written by W.S. Gilbert of Gilbert and Sullivan fame, pre-teaming with Sullivan, used the device as well, but the next work of note would be in 1882 when a novel called Vice Versa, A Lesson to Fathers, was published by first-time novelist Thomas Anstey Guthrie. It is this work that would introduce many of the tropes used by later works in the genre. It was about a father and son in then contemporary Victorian London. The father thinks the son should be enjoying boarding school as more as the best years of his life. The son thinks the father should be enjoying being a grown-up. Thanks to a magic stone from far off India, they swap, learn important lessons about seeing things from the other perspective, and then swap back better for the journey. It was a big hit in its day, spawning a play the year after, and numerous references from authors like P.G. Wodehouse, C.S. Lewis, and James Joyce. It would also be adapted for radio, film, and television when those mediums were invented.
It always starts with Mary Shelley. She's such an icon. Like, I know that it came from like the John Locke essay, but like a very early appearance in fiction being from Mary Shelley is just, she continues to impress me. Like, I really she was, incredible woman.
Well, and it reinforces the point that like a lot of times she gets dismissed as like, oh, she just did Frankenstein, and oh, maybe Percy Shelley really ghost wrote that because she's just who the hell is she, but no, she wrote a lot, and like my understanding of the like John Locke thing is like that idea of swapping minds into other person's bodies was more like a philosophical thought experiment to, again, like try and see things from another person's perspective. But again, like it was
Hmm.
taking it more philosophical thought approach. I was interested to learn that. I also, like I said, I was originally like like 4 or 5 paragraphs deep into like summarizing Shelley's transformation and then the next short story, and I was getting into summarizing the two Gilbert comic operas, um, and then I was like, I should probably condense this as much as I want to go deep. Vice versa, I was interested to learn, was a novel dating back that far. Like I said, I was familiar with, the most recent movie version from the late '80s that I grew up watching.
Yeah, I've never seen that one. But like I've mentioned before, I'm very familiar with like the body swapping concept. I feel like they did it a lot in like kids TV shows, because it would be really funny to have the kid stuck in the adult's body or something.
It eventually became like just a trope, that everybody
Right.
uses. Vice versa also spawned numerous imitations, especially because in this era it had a looseness of copyright in the era. Thus, body swapping just entered the general public popular consciousness. Now, we're going to go on a small detour, and it may seem like I'm completely out of my mind talking about any of this, but trust me, it will make sense. By 1930, Richard Rodgers had been born in 1902 and was already a successful composer thanks to his partnership with lyricist Lorenz Hart. 1930 was the year Rodgers married Dorothy Belle Fenier. Their first child, a daughter named Mary, would follow. Rodgers' career would only continue to grow even after the dissolution of his partnership with Hart, as he began working with a new lyricist, Oscar Hammerstein II, and the two would go on to write shows like Oklahoma and The Sound of Music. Rodgers' daughter would follow in her father's footsteps as she too began to compose music, first working for Little Golden Records, making songs for children, and later also making ad jingles and other music for television. In 1959, she wrote the music for her first Broadway show, the hit Once Upon a Mattress. She would compose music for several other shows over the next decade plus, while also having 2 marriages and 6 kids. Like, seriously, her first marriage lasted just 6 years, and she had 3 children in that time. Which brings us to 1972, when Rodgers decided to write a children's novel about 13-year-old Annabelle Andrews, who one Friday in fact, wakes up and astoundingly, and some might even say freakily, finds herself in her mother's body. She now finds herself navigating her mother's life while searching for her own body being operated by her mother, who has disappeared. Through the journey, Annabelle learns to appreciate everything her mother has to juggle in her own life. She sees her little brother Ben actually idolizes her. She sees her own friends in a new light and eventually sees her own physical self in a new way. Just when it all seems too much, it is revealed that Annabelle's mother is the one who caused the swap via unknown, at least to the audience, means to teach her daughter some valuable life lessons. It was called Freaky Friday, and the book was a success, leading to 2 sequel books, A Billion for Boris, sometimes called ESPTV, or A Billion for Boris, also known as ESPTV, in which Annabelle and her friend find a TV that lets them view broadcasts from the future, and they go all Biff Tannen to make money betting. And Summer Switch, same as the first book, but instead the husband and son switch.
It's interesting, the like husband and son thing, because there is a part of this movie that does kind of tease the idea of another two characters switching. So that's interesting.
Well, I was going to say that all then harkens back to the original vice versa.
Right,
But
right.
I was going to say all this stuff is so strange um, and unrealistic that I'm thinking that maybe at one time, there was a lot of misunderstandings of mysticism and witchcraft and spiritualism that maybe somehow people thought this was actually possible in a weird way. I don't know, because this makes no sense to me.
I mean, are we talking about realism? Is like, are you looking for realism in this movie? Because it's not.
No, what I'm saying is, how can it be? How can it be believable? Like, I don't know. I think this is so dumb that I think in order for you to go along with this, maybe that at one time people actually thought this was possible.
So, you saying this reminds me of the time that my grandma, I took her to see Over the Hedge, the animated film. And at the end, she was like, this is so unrealistic. Animals can't talk. Like, that's not the point. The point is, it's just like a funny little story, like I'm not saying like, but it's just like I don't think it's meant to be real or anything. It's just like a silly little concept, like the
Yeah.
idea of time travel. Like time travel, sure, some people could argue it's realistic, but also like we don't have the answers for that sort of thing. Does that make it invalid as a thing to ponder, I guess, is my question. I get what you're saying, but I also don't get what you're saying, is basically the
Yeah.
bottom line of what.
Well, I'm
Well, I
just a
mean,
grandma, and this is Over the Hedge.
Yeah, apparently you're my grandma with Over the Hedge.
I mean, like Rob, like you could talk about like how, like as much as they try and hand wave it, face off makes no sense, you know. And I mean, like essentially, as much as they're trying to like science that, like we take his face and put it on this one, like they're not truly accounting for mass and differences in height and other parts of the build, and
I was just coming
anything.
to as far as like, I could see how maybe in the early 1900s that maybe there was some people who thought that this was actually possible.
Yeah, I don't know about possible, but definitely like you are onto something with how, especially the original vice versa and later versions treat the other, use um, mystic foreign lands for the magic to come from. Rob, it's very similar to how
Right.
voodoo was portrayed, that
Yeah, that's
that's,
all I'm really trying to
Yeah,
say.
they'd
But
rather not
yeah,
explain, so they just make it this mystical thing. Yeah. And I do find it interesting that in this original one that they don't explain it. The one that you mentioned, that the
exactly.
mom just kind of just has the ability somehow.
It avoids the racism, and then the racism kind of comes back again. You know, we
Yeah.
can't get it out of here.
Yeah, I don't really know, like, I mean, obviously, like, both are not great ways, but like the lack of explanation is just kind of silly to me. Like, at least, I don't know, at least do something. You could just do general witchcraft. It doesn't have to be like foreign witchcraft. But who knows? Maybe they will do that with this new one, but I'm not sure.
The original book, it was less about, like it was in some ways very different than. It's funny that later adaptations keep bringing it closer to vice versa than, and like that tradition than other stuff, because like the original book, it was more about a you know, 13-year-old who isn't confident in themselves getting, it was, I mentioned like she does see like how chaotic her mother's life is, but it was as much seeing what her own life was like from the outside so she could appreciate that, that she could appreciate this friend who's helping the mother try and find the daughter, with the mother's mind in the daughter's body. Um, uh, and she appreciates this friend who she'd maybe taken for granted a bit. She sees this brother who she just thought of as annoying, and a pain, actually idolizes her, which you do get a bit of in the movie. But then she also, like, she'd had braces, and part of the reason the mother disappeared in the body is she remembered an appointment to get them removed that the daughter had forgotten. Um, and uh, when being in her mother's body and seeing herself from the outside, she sees herself, uh, as like this beautiful young woman, that which is definitely not how she saw herself while inside her body. So it's much more about like self empowerment, I think, than trying to see things from the other perspective. But you also, we'll kind of talk about uh, uh, the adaptations and why changes were made because I think some of the changes that were made were just practical from once you start getting into, adapting things for screen.
Right.
Anyway, that does kind of move us to in 1973, the film rights to Freaky Friday were snapped up by Marty Ehrlichman, who was Barbra Streisand's manager at the time. It was going to go through Streisand's production company, but it got stuck in limbo before emerging again in late 1975, now at Disney with a 1976 production starting date. They would eventually cast Barbara Harris as a Tony Award-winning actress who also had several previous Golden Globe nominations and an Academy Award nomination as the mother, and rising star Jodie Foster, who had her breakout in Taxi Driver come out right before filming began, was cast as the daughter. The movie made some changes from the book. Mainly, it wasn't the mother that caused the switch, but some strange magic, and thus both had to navigate the other's life and learn lessons, not just the daughter or the daughter in the mother's body, but you get the point. And a subplot was added of the daughter or the mother in the daughter's body needing to compete in a water skiing competition. Production occurred in the spring of 1976, and it got a limited theatrical release in order to become award eligible at the end of the year before receiving a broad release in February of 1977. The film did well with critics and at the box office, earning praise from critics and Golden Globe nominations for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy for both Harris and Foster. Harris was actually nominated twice in the same category that year, along with she was also nominated for her work in Alfred Hitchcock's Family Plot. That was very interesting, and it performed well at the box office, earning her around $36 million against a $5 million budget. Summer Switch was adapted as an ABC after-school special in 1984, starring Robert Klein, and A Billion for Boris was adapted in 1985, receiving a short theatrical run before airing on the Disney Channel back when it was still a premium channel akin to HBO in 1987, and then on CBS in 1988. A Freaky Friday remake was made for ABC's Wonderful World of Disney in 1995, starring Shelley Long and Gabby Hoffman.
So I'm wondering if the poster I'm thinking of is the 95 one then. Because like when you said Jodie Foster, I was like, that's not the girl I remember from the poster. So maybe, huh. Anyway, that's just a small me thing. I'll have to look up myself offline. But yeah, I thought that was interesting. Also interesting, like since I've only seen this version, I haven't seen the other earlier iterations. It's funny that you see the common patterns, like, oh, I have to do something I have no idea how to do because I'm stuck in my daughter's body, is something that also happens in this film. So I think it's cool that shows up in the other one. Although, man, this seems so much sillier to a water skiing competition. I'm definitely gonna have to watch this movie.
The 70s had a thing with water skiing competitions because you also have the Happy Days episode where the term jumping the shark came from. Would have been made not too much long after this. But I mean, like what I was talking about, like you understand from a practical standpoint about where some of the changes came from. Like, okay, like if you're casting people, you need to cast someone in the daughter role, especially like once they had Jodie Foster is enough of a name at this point. You can't just cast her and have her like appear only a handful of times as the daughter, while the actress as the mother is the one doing most of the lifting. Although there would be some practicality to that with restrictions around child actors. If you're going to have them both be equal roles, you then need to give the the mother in the daughter's body something to do, a goals and objectives. And so then it becomes, okay, we didn't, the mother didn't do this deliberately to teach the daughter a lesson. Now they both have to figure out a way out of it. And then, again, it was just, what's a wacky kind of sitcom-y, like thing. And we'll see like that, then evolves even more, sitcom-y in future productions. Some practicalities of screenwriting and casting, coming into play, but then making it less original and more like what's come before it, ironically.
I looked up the poster for the 1976 one, and it is the girl I saw, but I did not know that was Jodie Foster.
Yeah, well,
That's
because
crazy. Like, I feel like she looks different on the poster than in this other still from the movie. Like, in the still from the movie I'm looking at, that's her. But, like, for some reason, she looks different on the poster. So it hadn't even occurred to me that that was her.
because like, have you seen Taxi Driver at all?
No.
So I mean, like you're more used to
That
at
should be a
least.
full stop.
But you're more used to Jodie Foster, like as
Silence
an
of the
adult,
Lambs, older. Yeah.
which that's 14 years, 15 years later. You know, uh, did you know Jodie Foster? Like the first thing she ever did was Coppertone ads, like Coppertone sunscreen, where she's like like a toddler in diapers, and like the puppy is pulling on the diaper. Very famous ad campaign. She wasn't the original one doing it, but she was one of many that helped recreate that iconography for subsequent ads. Um,
Did not know that either. I swear some of the stuff, the knowledge that you have on random actors cracks me up. Like, why do you know that? How do you know that? Just
that
some random.
that is a famous anecdote about her. Like that is
Okay.
a very very famous anecdote about her. Like that is not like little known. I mean, it's trivia about her, but it's not like stuff that I just randomly picked up, like learning, or stuff that I learned doing this. Like, like
Yeah.
I didn't really know who Barbara Harris was. I don't have the name of the movie in front of me, but like the name, like we were kind of talking offline and some other discussions around the show. Um, the Barbara Harris, the movie she got nominated, her Oscar nomination for was a movie I'd never heard of, even though it stars Dustin Hoffman. It was from like 1971 or so. And then Family Plot I'd heard of, but it's very rare. I didn't go through and look at all like every actor actress award Golden Globe categories, but at least for Best Actress in a Comedy or Musical, no other actress had been nominated for two different films in the same year, and it acted as uh, uh, you know two separate nominations. Like I'm pretty sure based on like voting, it would have been like you could vote for Barbara Harris in Freaky Friday, or you could vote for Barbara Harris in Family Plot. And I think that partly explains why neither Harris and Foster already being nominated together in the same category, probably guaranteed neither was going to win because they were going to split votes as it was. But then Harris being nominated for something else herself in the same category definitely meant she was almost incapable of winning, because some people were going to vote for Barbara Harris in Freaky Friday, some were going to vote for Barbara Harris in Family Plot, and then some for Jodie Foster in Freaky Friday, and then I don't have in front of me who won, but it was neither of them. Shelley Long in the remake. Shelley Long, of course, was famous as Diane on Cheers. This is one of the few things post her time on Cheers that she did. And Gabby Hoffman worked especially a lot as a child actress, but she's been in a number of things. I just saw her in an episode of the most recent, the current season of Poker Face, season 2, that's airing now. Which was fun because she's childhood friends with Natasha Lyonne, who's the star of the show. Anyway, talking about how the 2003 version got made. Sometime between 1996 and 2000, I couldn't find an exact year, producer Andrew Gunn, no relation to other famous Gunns like James or Tim or the one that was used to shoot Archduke Franz Ferdinand, had a meeting with Nina Jacobson, then head of Buena Vista Motion Pictures, to discuss potential projects. For those who don't know, Buena Vista was the distribution arm of Disney, and then the name got used for organizing a number of various parts of the company as the years went by. Best to just think of it like he was meeting with an executive at Disney who could greenlight projects for our purposes. He had two projects that he was passionate about that only the House of Mouse could make happen. A remake of Witch Mountain. Witch Mountain had been a series of juvenile adventure movies in the 70s and 80s that had been based on a children's novel called Escape from Witch Mountain, and the other was Freaky Friday. Jacobson was hesitant as both had been remade in 1995. The Witch Mountain remake was part of the same Wonderful World of Disney ABC series as the Freaky Friday remake. They remade a couple of other movies. They 4 in total. Like one was also like the Shaggy Dog, and I forget what the fourth one was. But eventually, they let Gunn start working on a new Freaky Friday, but it wasn't a super active project at this point. That changed in 2000. Because of that thing, of course, we all remember. We said we would never forget. I could only be talking about The Princess Diaries. That film's success as a comedy aimed at teen girls made Disney want more projects aimed at that market. So suddenly, Freaky Friday got put into the fast track.
Princess Diaries is iconic for that, and also would have been a good pick for this because I think that one's also has a really good soundtrack and everything too. Do not know if Rob would enjoy that one. He might enjoy Princess Diaries more than this film.
I mean, like
think I saw that.
I've enjoyed it over the years, and oddly enough, again, a connection to The Sound of Music, the same as this one, because Julie Andrews is in it.
Mm-hmm. I love her in that movie.
Rob, did you watch any of the Witch Mountain series movies when you were growing up?
No.
Like
Didn't even know about it.
I was aware that they were around. It might be one of those things. I even watched one or two. I just don't have a definitive memory of it. But I was aware they were around. And they always seemed like something I would have enjoyed. But yeah. So the weird thing is, like, I don't know how this guy Gunn got into a meeting with a person who could greenlight movies, because like most of he has one credit as in a film actor in a very low budget Canadian horror film from '87 called The Gate. That's mainly notable because it has a young Stephen Dorff in it. And then he has a couple TV movie roles in the '80s. And then he was a producer on the 1996 Whoopi Goldberg movie, Eddie. And by the time this meeting would happen, that's the sum entirety of his credits. And he's not like a Nepo baby from what I can find out. So I have no clue why he was able to get a meeting. It baffles my mind.
All right, here's my theory. There is a famous director that he body swapped with, and who knew how to get in and get connections, and then got him this job, and then they switched back, and then he was like, "What?"
Yeah,
it's usually the most likely scenario.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. Now, because like production like was already kind of rolling, like 2000, 2001-ish. He did end up producing an adaptation of the Country Bears.
I love the Country Bears.
So you've seen the movie as well?
I love the movie. Listen, I know it's not good, but I love it.
I know Christopher Walken's surprisingly in it, but that's about it. So he did that. The same year Freaky Friday came out, he also did The Haunted Mansion, so he was kind of part of that. They were adapting rides at the time into movies. That's how we got Pirates of the Caribbean, which was the lone one to become a big hit. He also his lone writing credit is on one episode of an New Zealand horror anthology children's TV show. But weirdly, freakily enough, the title of the overall show is Freaky. And then he has a bunch of stuff we'll talk about like after, Freaky Friday. But it was just like, I looked at like this guy's background, like, well, who is he? How did he get in there? And I still can't tell you. So
nose to the grindstone. He did the work.
I couldn't resist making that 2001 joke because I have to make that anytime we mention that year, but also do my best to avoid saying the actual numbers because I'm pretty sure that would get us demonetized and screw up our ability to advertise the show. So anyway, the script for Freaky Friday came from a team of industry veteran Leslie Dixon, whose career had already included films like Overboard with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn, Mrs. Doubtfire, and the Thomas Crown remake from the late 90s. She was paired with newcomer Heather Hatch, who had run a screenwriting fellowship at Disney in 1999. And this is a kind of common thing you'll see in screenwriting where they'll take a veteran and pair them with a younger up and comer so the veteran can kind of show them the ropes in writing the script. But this wasn't like a lasting partnership where they would go on to, write a bunch of scripts together later on. One of the changes they made to the 1976 film was swapping out water skiing as the thing the daughter needed to do, and instead made her a reporter for her school's newspaper who is obsessed with music and needs to get to the House of Blues to interview Gwen Stefani. Hatch has admitted that this subplot was selected because she herself was obsessed with Stefani at the time and hoped it would lead to them meeting. They also added a thing the mother needed to do to help balance out motivations of both leads, but we'll get into that in more detail as we go into the plot. Director Mark Waters was brought in to helm this project. Mark was a graduate of the American Film Institute, where he was classmates with Darren Aronofsky, Todd Fields, and several other notable names, as we discussed in Part 1 of Episode 12 on Black Swan. After his time at AFI, he directed his first feature, 1997's House of Yes, starring Parker Posey, Freddie Prinze Jr., and Tori Spelling. House of Yes was based on a play Waters had originally seen while he was an undergrad at University of Pennsylvania. The film got a mixed response, as demonstrated by the fact Posey was given a special award at Sundance for her performance, while Spelling was nominated for a Razzie. There's also some interesting drama around the financing of the film involving Aaron Spelling and how that might have influenced Tori's casting in the first place, but we aren't going to dive into that. He followed it up with Head Over Heels, once again teaming with Freddie Prinze Jr., along with Monica Potter and a young Timothy Olyphant. Released in February of 2001, it was trashed by critics, like 10% on Rotten Tomatoes, and failed to recoup its modest $14 million budget at the box office. Waters actually thought he'd blown the pitch meeting to get the job for Freaky Friday. He recalls saying in the meeting, rather bluntly, the equivalent of, "F it, if you're already at the House of Blues, make them a rock band." While he thought that would be more cinematic, he was worried they wouldn't like his pushback against their original vision. But the studio ultimately liked it, and he was selected, and everything moved ahead with a $26 million budget.
Man, yeah, it would have been very different had it not gone this like rock band angle, because I think that's where we got so much of the great soundtrack for this movie and just the fun musical elements. I think it would have been very interesting if it had gone the journalism route, but also it would have been really cool to have Gwen Stefani part of this. I also, I mean, when she was like, "Oh, I wrote this to put in Gwen Stefani," that's something I would have done in, early days of writing. Like, "Oh, I just want this person to be a part of the project, so I'm going to write them into the story." That's so funny.
Yeah. Well, and like, we'll maybe touch on it a bit later when we get to casting, but probably around this point, the character is meant to be goth.
Yeah, she kind of becomes a little punk with time, but yeah. So meant to be goth. That would have been iconic too. Lindsey Lohan as goth. I would have loved it.
Kind of what I read is once we get to the final casting, like that person's casting kind of influenced a change in the character style.
Right.
But that was interesting. One thing, Rob, I thought about, like, because Kristen, you obviously know Freddie Prinze Jr. very well.
Yeah.
But Rob, you probably grew up. You watched Chico and the Man growing up, right?
No, but I know it.
Okay, so you know Freddie Prinze Sr. though.
Yeah, I
Uh,
remember. I know who he is.
yeah, yeah. So, Kristen, Freddie Prinze Jr.'s father was a famous stand-up who got his own show on TV that was a big hit in the mid to late '70s called Chico and the Man. Uh, but Freddie Prinze Jr. never really knew him because the father unalived himself just as the show was wrapping up, just before Freddie was born. But like as Freddie was breaking out, like in this mid to late '90s period, that got obviously brought up quite a bit.
Interesting. I just watched Scooby Doo live action this weekend. Man,
Well, and
actually, I know what you did last summer too. So I've been on a Freddie Prinze Jr.
yeah,
moment at the.
well, and he's going to be in the reboot for I Know What You Did, or like legacy
Yeah,
sequel, I guess technically, with Jennifer Love. But then, uh, talking about like big summer movies this year, uh, Scooby Doo also connects to Superman coming out in a few weeks from this recording, because that was James Gunn was the screenwriter for both Scooby Doo and Scooby Doo 2.
yeah. My friend was surprised when we were watching the movie, and he was like, "Wait, James Gunn was involved in Scooby Doo?" And I was like, "Yeah, he is." It's interesting.
Make him watch Tromeo and Juliet. Uh, the I think James Gunn's first screenwriting credit, because like he got to start working at Troma, which did like Toxic Avenger and like all those kind of movies, um, which is why like Lloyd Kaufman appears in a lot of James Gunn movies. Um,
But yeah, we're getting off topic
yeah,
with
yeah, yeah,
James
yeah.
Gunn.
Sorry.
We're not.
Yeah, yeah. But like, I thought that was very interesting. It was fun that like we had literally just talked about Mark, you know, 2 months ago, and when I was blown away that all these people, had gone to the AFI, were in the same AFI class, and then here we are talking about Mark again. It's getting really fun to be able to go like, I don't actually have to talk about this thing. Go listen to our other episode where we talk about it, um, and I can tell you the exact episode and even part. So, uh, but anyway, Jodie Foster was approached to see if she would be interested in playing the mother. And while this would have been a full reboot, it would have been a fun nod, but she passed. Eventually, they settled on the iconic duo we know today, with Annette Bening playing Tess, the mother, and Michelle Trachtenberg playing Anna, the daughter. Okay, so this clearly didn't last, but it ended up lasting a shockingly long time before filming started. Both Benning and Trachtenberg dropped out, citing officially scheduling conflicts, which may have been true, especially as Trachtenberg would still have been making the final season of the original TV Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and from what I understand, just couldn't get her schedule clear to also film the movie. Like the people at Buffy weren't being cooperative. Uh, with Benning, it's a little less clear what the actual conflict would have been, especially as there were reports she was concerned about the script. And then, as we'll talk about, when combined with the timing of her departure, it makes it like that might have been a cover, but you never know. Ultimately, Nina Jacobson saw True Lies on TV and thought Jamie Lee Curtis would make a great replacement to play Tess. Gunn and Waters agreed, and Curtis was brought on a mere 4 days before cameras started rolling, which is why I was saying if Benning is leaving with them only able to get Curtis with 4 days left, that makes it me less certain like what scheduling conflict popped up with that short amount of time before cameras are rolling. Um, Curtis, Jamie Lee Curtis, is the daughter of Hollywood royalty Tony Curtis, Some Like It Hot, The Great Race, Sex and the Single Girl, The Sweet Smell of Success, and Janet Leigh, Touch of Evil, Psycho, The Manchurian Candidate, Night of the Lepus, and was born in 1958. She began to pursue her own career with small TV roles in shows like Charlie's Angels, The Love Boat, and Columbo. She would star in a short-lived TV adaptation of Operation Petticoat, the movie of which had starred her father before her big break. That break would occur in a small independent slasher from film director John Carpenter called Halloween in 1978. The film was a huge hit, with Curtis appearing in Halloween 2 in 1981, H2O 20 years later in 1998, and Halloween Resurrection in 2002. Curtis would also work with Carpenter again in uh, The Fog alongside her mother, Janet Leigh, in 1980. Now established, she would go on to star in major films like Trading Places in 1983, Perfect in 1985 with John Travolta and directed by James Bridges from a script by Aaron Latham, as we discussed in the Aftermath section of Part 2 of our episode on Urban Cowboy, Episode 4. A Fish Called Wanda, 1988, and its spiritual successor, Fierce Creatures, 1997, Blue Steel, 1990, My Girl, 1991, and the aforementioned True Lies in 1994. Operation Petticoat, which, like I said, is a remake of a movie that starred Tony Curtis and Cary Grant. Well, not a remake, it's a TV adaptation, but that had John Astin, the original Gomez Addams from the original Addams Family TV show, as the head of the submarine, but then also taking over Cary Grant's role, and John Astin is father of Sean Astin, Mikey from the Goonies, Frodo from not Frodo, Sam Wise Ganji from The Lord of the Rings, and also my favorite movie, he's Toy Soldiers. It's a little less clear when the daughter was recast, when Anna's role was recast, because it's pretty clear Trachtenberg dropped out earlier, but some of the info is contradictory. Most agree Lindsey Lohan didn't have the best audition, but was chosen for her presence and track record of having previously starred in the Disney remake The Parent Trap. Some also add she was chosen for her chemistry with Curtis, but especially with how late Curtis got brought in, that conflicts with reports that Lohan did a year of training for the guitar portions, so I don't know. And then there's also the thing that some talk about when Lohan was cast, the style of the character was changed to be more preppy instead of the goth we were talking about. So big shoulder shrug there on what exactly the timing of all this was. Lohan beat out the likes of Kristen Bell, Kristen Stewart, Brie Larson, Misha Barton, and Evan Rachel Wood, among others. Another casting change was necessitated by Benning's departure, as Tom Selleck had signed on to play her character's fiancée, specifically to work with Annette. Once she dropped out, he gracefully departed as well. Again, that kind of still calls into conflict because I wasn't seeing anything like where, Mark, the person who replaced Tom Selleck was brought in late, but that it took so long to get the Jamie Lee Curtis brought on. It's just a very confusing timeline that I can't quite make heads or tails of, and I need more red string to make my site.
I wonder if like the DVD would have any clarification, like any behind the scenes stuff. I should have checked because I do have the DVD. I should have done my research for this because that it might have cleared up some of this like conflicting information. Who knows?
Well, and I should have looked to see if there were any special features, because like Disney Plus does have extras sometimes. Like that's where you find the best version of Muppet Christmas Carol, the one with the song added back in. Is not the just going and playing the movie. You've got to go into the extras.
I guess we'll never know for sure, but I think Lindsay Lohan was a really good for this role. Even like Michelle Trachtenberg would have been fine too, but like I don't know. I think like just Lindsay Lohan was so big in the 2000s, and I think this just made her even bigger. I think that like having her a part of this really helped her career.
If you look at the timeline of her career, you're thinking this helped it. No, she hadn't really done anything since Parent Trap. Like she'd had small roles, but she would like her career really wasn't going anywhere. Um, like it was this, and then followed immediately by Mean Girls that made her just blow up, and then as we'll talk about kind of everything else, you know, um, that it was, but like she was not a name, like even in child acting circles at this point in time.
But Jamie Lee Curtis for sure was a
Oh yeah,
name in
yeah, yeah,
this.
yeah.
And yeah, really glad they chose her for this too. I was so I obviously had seen this. Well, maybe not obviously, but I had seen this before seeing her in Halloween. Because I didn't really see Halloween until I was an adult. But I was surprised when I discovered that like the mom from Freaky Friday was the main character in Halloween. And so it's interesting because it's usually the opposite. Like you see, it's probably put her in a better state because so many people wanted to put her in a box with horror only because she was iconic starting out with horror, and then she tried to like shed from it a bit. But I had already known her from comedy stuff like this.
I'm trying to think of the first thing I might have seen her in. It might be Trading Places. That's kind of awkward because I would have been probably way too young to be watching that, and she takes her top off in that. Um,
Yeah, well, there's a slew of ones after Halloween that like
oh yeah,
there's a whole we talked about it in Scream. There's like a whole thing where Jamie Lee Curtis was in a ton of different type of stuff that she was really really big when once she took off from Halloween. Understandably, she was pretty good.
well, like both with this and True Lies, I tend to forget just how young Jamie Lee is in both those roles because um, she's about 8 to 10 years older than my parents. But as a kid, you just see that person as your parents' age. Um, and especially like when True Lies came out, I remember, like all the like Entertainment Tonight pieces and stuff. Like she has the very infamous, very famous, iconic striptease she does for Arnold Schwarzenegger's character at one point in the movie. Um, and they were talking about how brave it was for a woman at her age. So, to me, it sounded like she must be like in her mid to late 40s at that point. Doing that. Uh, come to find out, she was like 33. It's like, that's not that old. What are you talking about? And now finding out, she was like 42 or so. 42, 43. When making this movie. Uh, um, you know,
Yeah.
uh, or no, sorry, like 43, 44. It's like, oh, like she's only a couple years older than I am now, when she made this. And it definitely, like, I definitely see, how young she is, uh, when watching it. But,
A Fish Called Wanda was a pretty big film for her too.
oh yeah, no, Fish Called Wanda is great. And I actually also my family's always had a big love for Fierce Creatures, which isn't technically as good, but that's Kevin Kline and John Cleese and Jamie Lee and Michael Palin and some of the writing crew all together. Again, it's just not an actual sequel. They're not like none of the characters carry over. It's just all the same creative people um, making another movie together. But that also has a soft spot in my heart. Yeah, no, she. That's where like I had to list so many movies because she's been in so many iconic movies. True Lies, which is a great James Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger, like almost spoof of '80s action movies, and then Blue Steel, which was an early Catherine Bigelow movie. Uh, um, before she did Point Break or Hurt Locker or anything like that. Um, so yeah, no, Jamie Lee is great. So that kind of, uh, takes us to the next section. I didn't end up finding dates or length of production, but by all accounts, it was a fun shoot with a cast who got along together behind the scenes. Most of the anecdotes I read revolved around specific scenes or locations. So we'll kind of wait until they come up when we're going through the plot to avoid spoilers, if I remember. But The movie premiered on August 4th, 2003 in LA and was released across the US on August 7th. So with that, it's time to get our tickets, grab some popcorn, and head into the theater. Kristen, take us through the plot.
All right, so Freaky Friday starts out with photos of mothers and daughters throughout the ages, with the song Happy Together by the Turtles playing in the slow, traditional way it's often performed. I'm bringing this up for a reason. Some photos in this montage even include Jamie Lee Curtis with her real-life daughter Annie, so that's a cool little detail. And then the mood of the song abruptly changes with the sound of an alarm, and then we hear Simple Plan's punk version of Happy Together that is playing as Tess Coleman, the mother of this film, tries to wake up her daughter Anna for school. And Anna refuses to get out of bed. She is going as far as to hang on to the headboard to keep her mom from pulling her from the bed by her feet. But she finally does get up when her brother Harry triggers an air horn directly into her ear. And then she slams the door. And so that is the opening scene. We get a vibe of what the family dynamic is like. And then we get to see it even further on the drive to school, where we see Anna and Tess bicker about things like her wanting to get an ear stud and all of that, and her little brother is antagonizing her from the back seat. We also briefly meet another student, Stacey Hinkhouse, who Tess laments that Anna doesn't talk to anymore like she did in middle school. She's such a nice girl. But Anna insists that she is evil in high school, evil in the present.
Yeah, the little brother is played by the little brother's name is Harry Coleman. He's played by Ryan Malgarini. He This is probably like his biggest role. He also appeared in How to Eat Fried Worms, Gary Unmarried, Go Figure, and the sitcom Mike and Molly. He's currently teaching acting classes, but apparently he's going to be in the next version of Freaky Friday as well. And you mentioned Stacy. Stacy Hinkhouse is played by Julie Gonzalo, and most people would know her from her iconic role as Parker Lee in Veronica Mars. She's also in the show Eli Stone, Dallas, and Supergirl. And her movies include A Cinderella Story, Dodgeball, A True Underdog Story, and Christmas with the Cranks.
Christmas with the Cranks is another Jamie Lee Curtis
Yep,
movie.
sure is. Yeah.
Um,
And she's the mother in that as well. And yeah, and it's Julie. So Julie Gonzalo is like in a slew of various people that it's like I knew from the 2000s in these types of movies that somehow all end up on the Hallmark Channel. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating phenomenon. A lot of them end up on the made for TV thing because the actress who plays Gretchen Wieners in Mean Girls also is a
yeah,
very
Lacey
big
Chabert.
Hallmark. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people like that it's like, oh, I recognize them from this 2000s movie, and now they're like making Hallmark movies. It's interesting how they all kind of jump ship that way with their careers.
Lacey Chabert's career has been fascinating because she, got her start on Party of Five. She was one of the, family. Uh, I think she was like one of the younger siblings of the family. Either way, she was like one of the stars of the show. She then, like, also started doing a lot of voice work. Like, she was the original voice of Meg before Mila Kunis. Um,
Oh,
and
okay.
and then she also was the singing voice for young Anastasia because I think Kirsten Dunst was the um, talking voice, speaking voice in Don Bluth's Anastasia with like Meg Ryan and John Cusack. And then she also continued to do voice work, but then she also started to do like horror films. Like she was in the Black Christmas remake in like '06, I think, um, '05, something like that. And then
Yeah.
eventually transitioned into, just a crap ton of horror remakes. Oh, and in that time, she also was in the uh, uh, Lost in Space movie adaptation with like Heather Graham and William Hurt and Gary Oldman. Uh,
Just
yeah.
in case listeners were lost, we veered off. We're not talking about Julie Gonzalo anymore. Adam went on a whole thing talking about every film that Lacey Chabert has been in, because he clearly is a big fan. So
Yeah, because she was about my age, and as a teenager when I was growing up. So yes, she was a big part of her and Heather Graham were big parts of the reason I saw Lost in Space in theaters.
yeah, so I mean, talking about this opening scene, I think like it's interesting to watch it like as an adult because like it's one of those things where I thought like, okay, as an adult, I'm going to like be on Tess's side more often, but still, I'm still like, nah, Lindsey Lohan, man. Like just like even in this opening scene, like just the way that the family is interacting with Anna is interesting because like obviously she's dramatic, she's a teenager, but like it's not like all unwarranted, which we'll get into a little bit later, but you see the little bits of it starting out here in this starting opening scene.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there are times she's warranted for being dramatic. There are other times
A
she has
teenager.
no warrant. Yeah, but and then, there are also times, and I think, this is what it's meant to be is there are times the mother is clearly in the right, and there's times she is clearly in the wrong. That's
Yeah.
part of the why they need to see things from both perspectives. That if the mother was only ever right, there would be no reason to start to see things from the daughter's perspective. You know, um, but it's also like some of it's also just approach, that like you would think as a therapist she would be better at de-escalating even when the daughter is being needlessly dramatic.
Right. You can see the moments that she tries a little bit, but that there's like a scene where she does try to do the whole like I'm trying to understand type of thing. But yeah, like there's definitely points, and it's like I guess when you're at your home life, you kind of just want to decompress and not have to be in therapist mode all the time. But yeah, I just like the way that Anna and Harry interact just reminds me of my cats, like especially because like my one younger cat will antagonize my older cat, and then when he reacts, when he replies to some kind of advance, she acts like it's this horrible antagonizing thing. And then we end up yelling at Jack because we only hear her reaction. And it's like exactly what is going on here because like Anna is like replying when Harry is bothering her from the back seat, but then it's Tess who says like, "Oh, we quit antagonizing your brother," and it just cracks me up. Just like, I mean, because that's just a typical like sibling dynamic anyway. But yeah, that whole scene, I was like, that's literally my cats. It's so funny.
Yeah. Well, and like I can also remember being back to being a teenager, and the difficulty my mom especially had in getting me out of bed. um, Now, keep in mind, like I just had a futon with no frame on the floor, and so like I would tell her to like just kick me until I actually get up, and she never felt comfortable with that. She never felt like felt comfortable soccer kicking me in the back until I got out of bed.
I definitely like I think my mom would just like she would come up multiple times, but yeah, like she never like I definitely in the beginning of high school, like she would come and wake me up and I'd be like, "Oh, let's see how long I can stay in bed before she comes back to bother me again." But like now it's like I have an alarm and like once the alarm goes off, I'm up. Like I usually can't go back to sleep. But yeah, as a teenager, all you want to do is sleep.
Yeah. Well, and like for me, I was also dealing with a lot of mental health stuff, so that made it much harder to get out of bed and go to school, uh, um, and act like a human, and that then made life much harder on my mother. But and also she, I was, like by junior year, I was like 6 foot over, 250 pounds. So, it's a lot harder for her to then, like wrangle me or like, there was no way she could have done the whole pulling my leg, even if I had like a normal sized bed, you know, there's no way she was going to do like the pulling the legs thing. Um,
Right. Okay, so Rob, like, so this beginning opening scene, are you already not enjoying it, or when does it taper off for you? What do you think so far?
Um, I don't understand. What do you mean? I'm
Like in
following
this
along so far.
just this opening scene, just the what we've talked about in the plot so far. Like from what you saw at this point in the film, were you already not liking it, or did you were you okay with the beginning?
Oh, it was just like any other. I mean, there was nothing groundbreaking, so I just
Right, right.
yeah, it was just kind of family stuff. So no, all good.
Yeah, so I was just curious because I'm curious when it'll taper off because I'm
yeah.
sure I think I know exactly where probably, so we can get into
Yeah,
it.
there's a
Yeah,
yeah.
I think we don't get into that until part two.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, so at school we see that Anna is a typical teen. very hyper focused on how she's being perceived by her peers. She has a crush on a boy named Jake, who slow-mo walks by when she sees him looking her way. And we also see her in English class, where she receives an F on her paper on the book 1984 by George Orwell. And her teacher refuses to explain his reasoning for giving her the F. And when they have this conversation, she ends up insulting him, which lands her in detention. And it seems that Mr. Bates gives an F on every assignment, no matter how hard she tries, and we'll get explanation of that later. But for now, she's just very frustrated. And Anna is convinced the world is out to get her. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of true, but there are also a lot of ways it's not, and it's just a teen being dramatic. But there are some people antagonizing her on a day-to-day basis, and her mother does get a chance to see that, but in an interesting way, which obviously, if you know the premise of this film, you know why. And so with Tess, we see a different kind of vibe. We see that she is extremely busy, constantly juggling work as a psychiatrist. She's wedding planning. She's trying to be a mom, field a bunch of different calls, and she's juggling her earpiece, her cell, and her pager. And she drives the wrong way through an exit and triggers her airbags. And when she finally makes it into her office, her daily needy client, Evan, is waiting there, and he's panicking, convinced that she had forgotten about him and that she won't be as available as she claims to be by phone while on her honeymoon. And it's just a lot of chaos going on. She's at the grocery store at one point trying to shop and juggle different phone calls, including one about catering for the wedding. And so she is just constantly in motion, and then also trying to be a mom to these kids in the morning, get them ready and figured out. So you kind of see a little bit of where she's coming from, where she's just so frustrated and wants the kids to be able to get themselves ready for school. And so back with Anna, she's in gym class where Stacy, who we met in the first scene a little bit, she continues to antagonize Anna, and she's hitting her on purpose with her serve and knocking her out of the way while they play volleyball. And so in retaliation, when Anna goes up to serve, she hits Stacy on the head, which of course the teacher sees, not the many times that Stacy has done the things, which puts her in detention again, second time for the day. And leaving detention, her bag busts open, and as she's picking up the pieces, she interacts with her crush Jake again, who offers her a ride home on his motorcycle, which she has to decline because her mom would kill her. I've never seen it where detention is done this way. Like for me, detention was just done at the end of the day. You didn't have detention where you missed multiple like classes for it. I found that interesting. Even today, like every time it's I don't know if they were just trying to like show like she's a troublemaker, so they were trying to make it succinct, or if it is common. Did either of you guys have detention multiple times happen in a day like this?
No, I mean, you had two
Mm-mm.
kinds. I mean, you had the after school kind, and even that was mostly like you could get there for two reasons. You could get there for like you did something wrong, like, or you could get there for academic reasons, you know. Um, and then, like, if you really screwed up, you had Saturday detention, like in the Breakfast Club, but only like they wouldn't make you just sit in a room like in Breakfast Club. They would usually like make you like do a chore around the school or something.
Yeah, we had to clean too. But yeah, it's very interesting. But it's like, it is important to have, like, I like that they did this because you also get these small details, like her bringing the Powerade to the teacher and trading lunches and stuff. It's really showing that, like, she is a regular in detention. It seems like she understands that dynamic. She understands how things work here. And I like that it shows that without having to be like, hey, she's a rebel. Like, it's just kind of like showing how she ends up in this position anyway.
You could also get a lunch detention, but that was more like in middle school, and you'd have to like clean up, like use a rag and clean up tables and stuff. Um,
So let's talk about Jake. Jake was played by Chad Michael Murray. He's best known for his role as Lucas Scott in the TV series One Tree Hill. He also has a recurring TV roles in Gilmore Girls, Dawson's Creek, Riverdale, and Sullivan's Crossing. Films he was a part of include A Cinderella Story, Home of the Brave, Sun Records, The House of Wax, Christmas, and the Christmas film, The Merry Gentleman. Other than that, I know that he wrote a couple of, he wrote a novel and he also co-wrote a book with Heather Graham. It was a novel called American Drifter. That's the scoop.
You know what's funny? A Cinderella story is also connected once again to Stacey Hinkhouse because they date and their characters date in that movie. So there's lots of connections between a lot of the actors here, and we'll see that as we continue.
We get exposed to Mr. Elton Bates, the English teacher. He's played by Stephen Tobolsky, an actor and writer best known for films as Ned Ryerson in Groundhog Day, Sammy Jenkins in Memento, and Commissioner Hugo Jerry in Deadwood. Other notable films that he's been a part of include Heroes, Glee, Californication, Silicon Valley, The Goldbergs, and The Mindy Project. He has a monthly audio podcast called the I can't say his name. Toblowski
Tobolowski.
Files.
Stephen Tobolowsky.
He's also written books, which is interesting. And like, yeah, I did not know this man had a podcast. I don't know. It's funny because like, I feel like he is kind of a character actor of playing an asshole. Like, what's he like IRL?
Well, I mean, because I think he's very nice because he also plays very nice characters very well. And everything I've seen with him, he is very well liked. But he's also in like one of my all-time favorite movies, Sneakers, the Robert Redford like spy hacker movie from 1992. He's also in Single White Female, which I actually just watched for the first time earlier this year and was surprised to see him in there. In that one, he plays a real creep. Um, but then, like, also like weirdly because it's an early '90s movie. They like they also like make him a bit of a hero. Like it's very awkward. But he is literally one of my favorite character actors of all times. I love anytime he pops up.
And we also have one more person in this section here.
Willie Garson plays Evan, Tessa's patient. Some people may recognize Garson from his role as Stanford Blanche in Sex and the City. Other roles he has been in include White Collar, the rom-com Little Manhattan, Hawaii Five-O, and the sci-fi series Stargate SG-1.
Yeah, and sadly, he's passed away about 5 years ago.
I love him in this role. Like the Evan role
Yeah.
cracks me up. Like I know, like when you think about some of the like therapist elements, like I'm sure some of
Mhm.
this hasn't quite held up, like from a PC perspective. You know how the patients are necessarily treated and things like that. But I always found my mom and I always found this character really funny. We always like quote some of his lines because he's
Yeah,
just he plays a good neurotic type of character.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
he's
My
memorable.
mom would have called him, a nebbish kind of guy. Very nebbish. Uh, but one of the things I liked, like, you know, like overall, like there are some things that very date the movie, but one of the things that dates the movie the most is how many devices Jamie Lee Curtis has.
Yeah,
You know that she's got like a flip cell phone. Like your thing.
the
She's got the
pager.
pager. She's got an organizer. Like a palm. Like it was like even like a precursor of like a BlackBerry.
Yeah.
It was more like the Apple Newton kind of palm organizer, and just like. But I mean like that was shorthand to show, like she's an adult. Like a few years later, like to show she's a super busy, important adult, you would have had her have like a BlackBerry or something.
Yeah. Something else interesting. So, like I mentioned in the summary that she had written a paper on 1984, and I never knew that. Like, cause I feel like when I was a kid, I never watched movies with subtitles, but now I do a lot of the time because I feel like I miss stuff otherwise. And so when I was seeing the subtitles and that I knew what they were talking about because I feel like as a kid, sometimes if you don't understand what they're talking about, it's just like blah, 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 blah. And you're kind of just like, oh, she got a bad grade in a paper. But like, I actually understood what she was talking about this time because I just read 1984 for the first time this year. I never read it in high school. Yeah. So I just read it for the first time a couple months ago. So I was like, oh, I know what they're talking about. Like, that's what they've been saying this whole time. Cause like, it's been a while since I've watched this movie. But yeah, I thought it was funny to notice something like that as an adult.
Yeah. First off, Orwell is the man. Have you also read Animal Farm?
Yes, I did. Loved Animal Farm. Also read that
Yeah,
for the first time this year. I've been trying to read more banned books this year.
yeah, yeah.
So that's been a
Uh,
goal of mine.
but George Orwell is the man. But yeah, no, I mean, like that's interesting. You say that because like you ask like how I know so many things. It's because like I would pay attention to, like when they would make remarks like that in other movies. So like I talked about, like I've talked with people before, like by high school, I would not necessarily need to read any of the books because I knew the plots already, like of like everything they were assigning us. Like I was already familiar with almost everything they were giving us because I picked it up from pop culture. And so like there could be times, like with me having my issues with school where I would like have not read the book, be having to do an in-class essay on it, but know the plot well enough I could skim and find the sections I need to make the appropriate argument and get like a B on the essay.
It's honestly surprising that I never had to read these. I never had to read any Orwell in school because I think a lot of people did. But either way, like I'm glad to have read a lot of that kind of stuff now. I've been
Yeah.
trying to get to a lot of those ones that or even like ones I've read in school that I feel like I just didn't care about because, it's different when you're reading for fun versus an assignment.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's a couple like that I really want to revisit, like Frankenstein for specifically, because I read Frankenstein in college and I feel like when you have to overanalyze it, it's not fun to read
Hmm.
Frankenstein. I feel like it could be fun if I'm reading it just for
Yeah.
pleasure.
Well, and some of that could also just be how language has evolved over the past 200 plus years, or
Hmm.
200 so years, because, that was something when I was looking at because I was, since it's in the public domain, I was able to find the transformation online and I was skimming through it, but that Gothic language just is not for me. Like I
Yeah,
know like MJ really likes like Jane Austen, which you know,
I like Jane
same
Austen too.
time period, but like just some of it just felt like, and maybe it was because I was also trying to get through it as quickly as possible to, because I was like, oh, I've got all this other stuff I've got to read, to do research, and we were trying to get this episode turned around quickly. So, but yeah, it definitely is a difference between reading for pleasure and reading for, when you have to. But I definitely also found books in high school that I ended up having to read. Sometimes it's just time and place and where you're at mentally and the age you're at. I know, like, I was asked to read To Kill a Mockingbird when I wasn't really mentally ready for it. I was like 13 when I was reading that, and I did not care for it. Maybe I was like 14. But then, uh, like at 19, I loved it and read it like every summer from like 19 until like my, like 23, 25, something like that. Um, and I need to revisit that. But also, like, if you really liked 1984, one of the best adaptations of it isn't actually an adaptation of it. It's a movie called Brazil, by Terry Gilliam, and it's basically the same plot as 1984, um, but like this hyper stylized thing. So I'd highly recommend
Interesting.
anyone check it out.
So, I guess we've probably talked
Yeah,
enough
yeah,
about
yeah,
books, even though I would love to continue talking about books. Let's get back into the plot here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So Anna comes home to find her brother drumming on top of her guitar, with drumsticks. But my God, that would stress me out anyway. So she takes care of him by duct taping a pair of underwear over his head. And then she comes into the garage and begins rehearsing with her rock band, Pink Slip, who perform their song, Take Me Away. But just as Anna really gets into the guitar solo, her mom cuts the power. But it's okay, because Anna's bandmate Maddie gets the news that they are now set to perform in the Wango Tango auditions at the House of Blues. The only problem is that it's tomorrow, when Anna's mom's rehearsal dinner is happening, and as her maid of honor, she has to be there. In this part of the film, we also meet Tess's fiance Ryan and the grandpa who's coming into town for the wedding. And Tess also gets a call about Anna's 2 detentions, so she decides to remove her daughter's door as punishment. And then from there, once they have the confrontation, she tries to get an explanation from Anna, but Tess is not very receptive to Anna's explanations, her teenage woes. And so it's just more of the clashing, more of like how they're just not seeing eye to eye in any sense of the word.
No, completely understand.
You know,
Um,
when they said Wango Tango, I like that brought back so many memories, and I was like, how long has that been over? Like,
I don't know. I only knew it from this film, so you wouldn't probably know the answer more than me.
well, I know it from the Ted Nugent song, but I don't know what else. Like, so I was going to ask, like, what the hell is a Wango Tango audition?
it's a well, it used to be a festival. I guess it's still
Oh,
going on.
Okay, yeah. I
never
mean,
heard
that's
of it.
what kind of what it seemed it was because it was like there. It's like the audition to be in the festival. I guess is what it sounded like from this movie.
Yeah, I guess
So that's
it will be.
interesting.
There's one this
Yeah.
year with like Doja Cat and Gwen Stefani.
Oh,
Oh,
wow. Well,
interesting.
see, that's good clarification for me because, like, I was going to ask, like, what the hell are they actually auditioning for? Because that wasn't super clear to me. Um, but that's just because, like, Wango Tango is a Ted Nugent song. But okay,
Huh. Well, we get to see Mark Harmon as Ryan Volvo. Mark Harmon is a pretty well-known actor, writer and producer, TV director, best known for playing the lead as Leroy Jethro Gibbs on NCIS. A mainstay, you know, of like on TV and whatnot since like the 80s. He actually been acting since the early 70s with roles on St. Elsewhere, Reasonable Doubt, Chicago Hope. Starred in films beyond Freaky Friday, but Summer School, Prince of Bel Air, White Earp, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, Crossfire Trail, Chasing Liberty, just to name a few. Very well established. You should recognize him.
I had no idea that his name was Volvo. That's just like when I was looking up the like
yeah.
actor info stuff, I was like, that's so funny because like, the character drives a Volvo at one point. And it's just
But,
like, what? They just did not care. They're just like, yeah, we'll just make his last name Volvo.
well, it's also like a joke because he's so boring and reliable. Um,
Ah, yeah, I could
but
see it.
that's also clearly we didn't come up with a last name for this character. It wasn't important. It's never going to be mentioned, but we need to give the character a last name, so it doesn't, so it gives the character more importance in the credits. So Volvo.
You
Um,
would think that because like Tess and Anna are potentially going to take the last name that they would try a little bit harder. That's so funny. Yeah, because you know their last name.
well, so another connection Mark Harmon has to Freaky Friday is he actually was in a movie with Jodie Foster in the late 80s called Stealing Home. And he also, before he got into acting full time, he was the quarterback for the UCLA Bruins, but did not make the NFL.
Yeah, and so Grandpa Alan Coleman, Tessa's father, is played by Harold Gold. Gold is most recognized for his roles as Martin Morganson in the sitcom Rhoda and Miles Weber on the sitcom Golden Girls. He's a five-time Emmy Award nominee with a 50-year career in film and TV, appearing in more than 300 TV shows, 20 major motion pictures, and over 100 stage plays. Some of his earlier works were Two for the Seesaw, The Coach, The Yellow Canary. Later in his career, in the 2000s, you see him in movies like Stuart Little and The Masters of Disguise, The Whisper of the Heart. I think this is one of these actors that you probably recognize his face more than anything just because of his body of work.
Yeah, I think he's been in a background of a lot of things. But I was very surprised to learn that he was in Whisper of the Heart, the like English dub of that Studio Ghibli movie, because that's my favorite Studio Ghibli movie. And when I was looking up stuff, I was like, wait, what? He's part of this? And he like plays a very prominent character in that film. And I was like, man, he really is everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
A couple that to point out is Maddie is sort of a standout friend, right? She's played by Christina Vidal. But she has, not the longest body of works, but she does have roles in Life with Mikey, Brink, See No Evil, Code Black, and Training Day. I was trying to think who she was in Training Day.
I don't remember who she was in Training Day, but like Life with Mikey, she's co-stars in that. Like she is second billed with Michael J. Fox. That Michael J. Fox plays a former child star who's now like running a talent agency, and he spots this orphan who he thinks is going to have a lot of talent. And Christina Vidal plays the orphan. It's also got Nathan Lane, Christine Baranski, a very young David Krumholtzer, uh, really fun Michael J. Fox movie. And then, Kristen, have you seen See No Evil? Because that's a horror film.
So I remember seeing the trailers for it, but I don't think. Wait. It's not the new one. Let me look it up because
No,
there are a lot of
this
evil
is from like
movies.
2008.
I feel like
2000.
I remember seeing the trailer, but I never did see this one.
I've seen it because it stars a pro wrestler
Of
named
course.
Kane, whose real name is Glenn Jacobs, and he is now the mayor of Knox County in Tennessee, because life is not real.
I,
But
I thought that was a movie
uh, it also
Richard
is,
Pryor.
yeah, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, I believe is
That's it.
because Richard Pryor is blind and Gene Wilder is deaf, or the other way around. I don't remember.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, it's the because it goes Silver Streak, Stir Crazy, See No Evil, Another You. I think are the Gene Wilder, Richard Pryor team ups. But this See No Evil is about a bunch of like delinquent teens who have to spend their weekend like doing community service work, cleaning up an old abandoned hotel, and then get stalked by a killer played by Kane. Um, and they're
I was
killed
like
off one
second
by one.
guessing myself because there is a film that came out relatively recently called Speak No Evil. There's two different versions of it. And so for a second I was like, wait, have I? And then I remembered, no, Speak No Evil is, yeah. But
Yeah, but you like it's trashy. It's not the best, but like you might enjoy See No Evil. And it actually got a sequel, but Christina wasn't in that one. But I remembered her from Life with Mikey when I was growing up. I remembered her name, and then when she popped up in See No Evil, uh, that made me happy. But then I hadn't remembered she was in this until we were watching it. And it was like, oh, it's like seeing an old friend. Like, oh, you.
yeah,
Another actress to point out is Haley Hudson, who played the role as Peg. Hudson appeared in a few roles other than Freaky Friday. It included Marley and Me. She was in Weeds, Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, and the IFC horror film The Pact. Apparently, she will also be making an appearance in the next Freakier Friday.
yeah. I always thought that her hairstyle was interesting. Like the way her hair was like constantly like covering her eye completely. Like I know that that was like the style, but I remember at certain points being like, how are you not blinking your like hair into your eyeball? Cause like that's what would happen to me when I would try to wear my hair like that. Like I would just get a bunch of hair in my eye.
She kind of gave me a goth girl look, you know?
Yeah, like at least we still got a goth girl in this. We still got a goth rocker.
Yeah, and
But
I believe Christina is also going to be in Freakier Friday. But Terminator, the Sarah Connor Chronicles, that was probably the first place I saw Lena Headey, who would go on to be Cersei in Game of Thrones, because she played the aforementioned Sarah Connor in that.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like when it comes to like what happened in this part of the plot, I this is one of those moments that I think like I thought as an adult that I would understand more of Tessa's perspective with how she handles the detention stuff and talking with Anna at the kitchen table and things like that. But honestly, I was still kind of frustrated with the way that it's portrayed as like you're a teenager, so your issues are invalid, which I don't think is ever a good thing for teens to have to be told. I think that that is something that is frustrating even as a person who's not a teenager anymore. I think that teen troubles are also valid, even if they're not like to them, you're going through so many changes. Like, of course, these things are going to feel like the end of the world. And I do wish that, like it wasn't discounted in that way, but I understand that it's supposed to be that way so that you show that they don't understand each other, that they don't see eye to eye.
Yeah. Well, and one of the other things, like like we were talking about, like questioning what Jamie Lee Curtis is doing as a parent. Now, and keeping in mind, like I also like once they start talking about the timeline, like you like, okay, I have a little more sympathy for everybody involved because they're probably still processing a lot, and the mother should really understand that the family probably needs more therapy than it's getting if it's only been like 3 years since the father of the family passed away. Um,
Right.
it's seemingly unexpectedly or, whatever. And like, well, that's an appropriate time for the mother to have, you know, to be in a new relationship and, potentially be getting married. Well, not to say appropriate because there's no like truly appropriate timeline for that kind of thing. Um, you know, uh, uh, it's not inappropriate. You also understand like this is all a lot happening to all these characters all at once. But one of the things I was thinking, especially as we were going through, talking about like uh, uh, Anna getting an F on the paper, it's like, the daughter could just show the mother the actual essay, and then it would become clear
Yeah.
to the mother, like, oh no, this, which you would think, especially if this is a reoccurring problem, which, as you pointed out, it sounds like it is, at a certain point, the mother would ask to do, you know, um, like, okay, let me see your work, maybe I can help. Oh, this guy is crazy if he is giving this an F. Um, let me go talk to him. Oh, he's my old schmuck from high school.
Right. But also think about the fact that this is like Anna, it doesn't want to explain herself. She just wants to be
Yeah.
understood. She's not thinking logically, obviously, or she doesn't even get a chance because, like, her mom says something that pisses her off, and then, they don't actually get to have that conversation. I mean, Rob, you have teenagers. I'm sure you can sympathize and you see that, like, sometimes you want to get something across to them, but they are just not wanting to listen and understand where you're coming from because they're only thinking of what is going on in their head, I'm
Oh my
sure.
God, yes. Not even human.
And I'm sure this is probably also why you didn't necessarily love this film, because it probably just reminded you too much of being a parent yourself.
That could be a part of it.
I mean, because Anna certainly, she's certainly dramatic. She's certainly a lot, but also like she is going through some stuff that, like isn't getting properly addressed, like the loss of her father, which we'll get into, I guess, a little bit more. But yeah.
Yeah. I'm laughing very much now because I was thinking about like just shaking the child and till you get your point across, which made me think of yesterday I rewatched a great movie called Black Dynamite, which is a spoof of black exploitation films um, from the 70s specifically, and was made into a really great show on Cartoon Network. But one of the lines that jumped out to me on this rewatch is Black Dynamite is at the orphanage and he's shaking one of the kids. And it's like, I'm going to shake you until you stop using heroin, until you get off the smack. And I'm not going to stop shaking you. And the revolutionary kind of love interest character says to him, we already tried that. It didn't work. And it wasn't so much the him saying, uh, I'm going to shake you until you stop using smack. It was her follow up of, we already tried that. So then I'm now just in a loop of amusing myself.
I really hope that some parents didn't like take notes from this movie, like, oh, I can just take the door off of their bedroom and that will solve all the problems. Privacy is a privilege. Bars, never thought of that. Because, like,
Well,
man, I remember thinking, like, if my mom did that to me, I'd be so upset. Just like
so,
taking the door. That was a bold move on Tessa's part.
so that was a very media style parenting. Like you would see that a lot in media in this era, that kind of logic and reasoning and talking. But it was also like it's not very far off. Like it's very similar to reasoning. Well, I never experienced with my parents that I know happened with a lot of other kids. And again, you would see in media that kind of, if you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about, like my house, my rules, you'll do as I say, not as I do. All these kind of, very frustrating parenting tactics. And like, I don't have kids, but I wouldn't want to I don't want to see what they're doing in their room. Like, I don't want to see them not have privacy to change or something. Like, you know, like that's just going to weird me out. Like that's hurting me.
Right. And yeah, I don't know. It was a bold move for sure, and I'm very glad that I never did
That's
anything
true.
so bad that my mom took my door.
Yeah, yeah. But jumping back to dodgeball, bold move, Cotton. Let's see if this one plays out. But that sounds like that is where we're going to have to leave things for today. Will Anna be able to make it to the audition? Will Tess have the wedding rehearsal of her dream? Will Stephen Tobolowsky be more of a creep than he was in Single White Female? Tune in to part 2 to find out. While you wait for part 2, take some time, tell us all the things we got right, all the things we got totally wrong, and everything in between. You could do that in the comments if the platform you listen to us allows comments. If not, you could do that on social media. We are at Savage Movie Night on Instagram and Facebook. Follow us there and stay up to date on the latest with the show and drop in the comments to share your thoughts. Thanks so much to our editor, Javi, and the entire Savage Content team. Thanks so much to my co-hosts, Rob and Kristen. Thanks so much to our sponsors, Jazzology with Willard Jenkins. And most importantly, thanks so much to all of you for listening. Please give us 5 stars and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like, a follow, ring the bell, drop into the comments, all the good YouTube things. I've been your host, Adam, and we'll see you next time on the Savage Movie Night Podcast.